All right. So today we are talking with Alisa Clark with Welcome Home Huntsville, which has made a huge splash in this community over the past couple of months. So if you are not sleeping under a rock, I'm sure you have seen it because it is fantastic.
Oh, thanks.
But I am thrilled to have you. Alisa has been someone who we personally have had a chance to get to know each other a little bit more over the
Mhm.
past couple of months and know some of your family members too. We've got one in studio behind the camera, Casey, give a big shout out. But they have done, and Alisa, has also just brought such an amazing energy here to this town with something that really we haven't seen before, which is super exciting. So we're going to talk a little bit more about Welcome Home Huntsville for sure. But first, let's just start with you. And your background is so fascinating of journalism and psychology and DEI and all sorts of different things. And so we'd just love to hear a bit more about you and your background, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here. I say that I studied everything fun and non-marketable in school. So all the liberal arts things that are awesome and great to study, but don't necessarily make you money or get you a job. So yeah, I had an undergrad in psychology and English and music, kind of all wrapped together. Um, and then was initially going to go on to do a psych PhD. Ended up working in a lab for a couple of years instead of doing that, and realizing that I just preferred the publishing process to the research process, and that was a kind of the impetus for going into a journalism grad program, and then moving on to work in academic publishing, which is where I kind of built my career.
Yeah.
That was up in Boston, and I ended up working for a company called Cell Press, which is a very prestigious science publisher that does really high quality research. So I
Hmm.
got to work with some really brilliant scientists to help them publish their work and release, groundbreaking research, which was just a really rewarding place to build a career.
Oh, yeah.
So I was very happy there for a very long time. Well, I don't know that very long. I probably worked there for 7 or 8 years.
Hmm.
Over the years, ended up kind of rising from the frontline publication to managing journals and then launching journals and working with sort of the more abstract publication issues. And then ended up working as the head of DEI for the Cell Press organization on a whole, which was about 67 journals, doing DEI and psychological safety work for that organization. And it was extremely, again, rewarding, but also very high burnout sort
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
career. I had ended up going remote when I had kids. And so over the few moves back to Huntsville, which is my hometown,
Hmm.
ended up just feeling like I was spending all my time on Zoom meetings with people I didn't know, and then going straight to parenting and not really like living the life I wanted to live.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of where I came from before I started Welcome Home Huntsville.
Yeah. So I want to go back to some of the things that you were speaking about. I find it fascinating that you were intrigued by the publishing process when
Hmm.
you were on the other side of it. So unpack that just a little bit more. And I think you and I have talked about this too, where we share a love of a print publication, like the
Absolutely.
physical smell of a print piece that you can pick up. And I feel like I'm really aging myself here, but I really miss the days of a newspaper. Like that, I
Me
absolutely
too.
love newspapers. So talk a little bit about how that transition unfolded and what, did something happen at that particular time where you were given a project and it just opened up a new world for you, or how did you get exposed to that?
Yeah, I've always been a big nerd. I was the kid in college who would read the New York Times at the cafeteria table with my lunch, like the actual physical
Yeah.
newspaper. We had that in my college, and we were all very excited about it. Me and my nerd friends. So I also love a print publication. I love a newspaper. And I had initially gone into college actually to go into journalism. I thought that's what I
Mhm.
wanted to do, and then just kind of waffled and changed to psychology because I felt it was more. I don't know. I resonated with the mission of kind of helping people,
Yeah.
and some of the more abstract study of the discipline, and then. Um, when I ended up working in the lab, I was working in a neuropsychology lab. So it was very kind of hard science, very, we were doing stroke rehab down at UAB. And I got to do a lot of the sort of hands-on work with stroke patients and
Oh,
people who were
wow.
recovering from these traumatic brain injuries.
Oh my gosh.
It was really fascinating work, but I learned a lot more about what it meant to be a researcher. And the pace of it, honestly, is extremely slow.
Yeah.
So, I was working in this big lab, and it was an extremely prestigious lab. It was an extremely well-respected lab, and it took 10 years to get anything done. And we were constantly begging for grants. And I just saw that future stretching in front of me and thought, this is not the life I want. I don't,
Yeah.
it was much more kind of academia focused than what kind of I was interested in doing day to day. But we also published a lot of papers.
Yeah.
And so, getting to work in the publication of those papers, putting them together, editing them, submitting them to different journals, kind of discovering what that world was like, which is nothing I'd ever seen before.
Yeah.
It was less of what I was turning away from, I think, and more I was turning towards. I saw that this is an interesting world, and I didn't realize how kind of big an industry scientific publishing was. And it was a place that I could go and use some of those skills. I've always been an editor, and so, I did copy editing and that kind of word crafting. It was somewhere I could use those skills in support of science, in support of research, and the things that I was passionate about. And so it just felt like a good fit.
That is so cool. I would imagine you came across so many interesting articles where you're just constantly learning about.
Absolutely. That was the best part of the job. I would
think so.
I was managing a journal called Cell Hosted Microbe, which is, I think, ranked the world's leading virology journal. It's like most of the journals I worked with were very narrow. 50 people read this, but they're the 50 smartest people in the world in this,
Right.
But we were publishing COVID research during COVID.
Very
and,
cool.
I would get an email saying, this is an article that needs to go out tomorrow because it's going to save lives next week, and so we have to get it out now and quickly and figure out, how to make that happen. And it was very
That's crazy.
Exciting to get to read that stuff a little before everyone else did.
I would imagine. Speaking of that, ironically, one of our former interviewees that we did with Kim Hansen, she's the Army Material Command Deputy Chief. She was responsible for, and I cannot remember the name of the mission, but she was responsible for the communications infrastructure in response to COVID.
Amazing.
She was pulled up to DC immediately and was there on like a 4-month stint doing all of and it's like, how do you launch a communication strategy?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And like hearing her side of it too, where you're in the very early stages of that deploying and seeing that stuff come out. I mean, that would keep me up all night long.
Right. It's got to be incredibly stressful.
It's so stressful.
It's a lot of pressure.
So like, where do you, but just fascinating too at the same time, and I think it's easy to say that now looking back. At the time we're all freaking out, but just fascinating information.
A lot of us who were working in the sciences at that time felt like this is my moment. This is the moment when people are understanding kind of the value of what we're doing, and it was rewarding too, even if it was stressful.
I could see that.
Yeah,
I could also see. There potentially be a lot of frustration as well when you provide factual basis for information, and then that gets misconstrued.
Yes, that's pretty consistent. But I
which
also,
would be like,
Yeah, it was frustrating, but at the same time, I have a lot of grace for that because the papers that I was reading, like I'd been training for years to understand these things, and there's still a lot of it that was just over my head. So it's not easy to interpret the kind of scientific data that we were getting.
Yeah.
So, I understood that, sometimes we just get it wrong.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears, a career of not necessarily burnout necessarily, but a lot, right?
Yeah.
And I would love to just unpack a little bit about your role when you were sort of overseeing the DEI initiatives too.
Yeah.
And just understand a little bit more about what that means exactly in the realm that you were executing it in with your role.
Where I was at, and I think where a lot of companies have been at for the past few years, is they had a lot of disparate programs, had a lot of initiatives that a lot of very passionate people were rolling up and starting to realize, okay, we haven't really been measuring these. We haven't really been looping them into an overall company strategy. We don't really know. We know where we came from. We don't really know what we're getting. Are we putting enough resources into things? Are any of these things working? And what my role was attempting to make a cohesive company strategy and company, who are we as a company in DEI, rather than this editor over here is concerned about this, so that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Trying to roll that up into a program that actually moved the needle in a way that was measurable and meaningful. So it was honestly a lot of program development.
Yeah.
It felt like a lot of project management, as far as, making sure that everyone is recording what they're doing and there's not knowledge loss every time an individual leaves. Making sure that we're not relying too heavily on sort of a diversity tax is one of the big issues that I was working on. In that, it was all volunteer work in a lot of ways. So, people who cared about it ended up working 60, 80 hours a week for no extra pay, and that's not fair to them, and they're not, progressing in other areas of their career. So trying to spread the effort and the and kind of bring the goals that we had up to a company level, rather than just kind of relying on frontline people to just devote their time because they care.
Yeah. Makes it a little bit more challenging when folks are operating in a silo a little bit versus having something streamlined. So any thoughts on sort of the shifts of DEI effort across the board? I mean, I know your world was very niche in what you were doing, but just with the kind of pullback on some of that focus, and then don't want to open up a, rabbit hole of anything, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But honestly, I mean, from 30,000 foot, what's your perspective on that? And how do you see that kind of impacting the space that you were in?
I think there are some really brilliant people doing great work in DEI. I follow Lily Zhang. She's kind of the person I always recommend. And one of the things that I've discovered is, in the past few years, there's been some kind of realistic pullback, in the sense that, like, the things that we're doing weren't always working, and they were sometimes having the opposite effect than the things that we wanted them to have. And so it's difficult, because I think you can say, this is the value I have, and those values were right, and we should be pushing for those things. But taking a step back and saying, this program that everyone was so excited about, we spent a lot of money, and did we actually do anything? Did we move the needle? Or maybe we have been talking about this program and we've never resourced it the way it ought to be resourced. So we're not actually spending the money, and so let's just put our money where our mouth is in some ways. So I am sympathetic to those who have the feeling that we did a lot of work and spent a lot of lip service and we shouldn't have necessarily done that. At the same time, I think the values of the movement were correct and still are correct. And we just kind of need to step back and focus on what we can measure and what actually works. I would be very sad if, companies stopped doing DEI work. I would not be sad at all if they made dramatic changes to how they're doing it. So I'm still optimistic. I think we still have a lot of room to do the work in the world that we care about, in a way that is a little more strategic and a little less kind of reactionary.
Yeah.
I certainly, in the academic publishing world, people are very afraid right now of losing funding and losing support because of having these programs. And I do think that's a shame and a major problem in a lot of circles, where people just feel like, I'm going to lose my job if I keep on, doing what I believe in.
Right. Well, and the field of research is so vast too. In a way, we will not get into it by any means, but a blanket approach of sort of like cutting things doesn't necessarily take into account some of those prescriptive areas of focus, which is just so frustrating.
Yeah. And as a supporter of research in general, it's especially frustrating because that's how we discover what works.
Yeah.
We're not going to be able to say, does this program work? Is this program a waste of money? Unless we're doing it and measuring it.
Right.
So that's the point of what we're doing is trying to figure out, in 10 years, we want to know, what every company should be implementing, and that we're not going to get it right every time. That's the process of research.
Yeah. I think looking at from a corporation perspective and a company perspective, fortunately for organizations like ours, right, we're not necessarily mandated by those things, right? So if there are things that are important to us that we want to reinforce, we're going to continue to do that, in our own way. And I think that's a lot of what businesses and corporations just need to do, just take their own initiative.
Yeah.
But so let's switch gears a little bit because after working in that world for a very long time, you made the insane decision to start your own business when you
It
have
does kind of feel
little
like that.
kids at home.
Mhm.
And I know I'm like, what are you thinking? But we share this same love of insanity that we,
Yes,
for some
clearly,
reason.
clearly.
So the publication that we have here that you decided to launch, actually, let's back up a little bit. So before we kind of dive into it, obviously you were faced with a time in your life where you kind of were making some decisions, right?
Yes.
What do I want to do? Which direction do I want to go? Talk to us a little bit about that process and sort of what was the catalyst for you where, and regardless of what the reasoning was, right? Did you decide to 100% step out and do something different? Did you already have this plan halfway baked when you decided to do that, take that departure? Like, what did that process look like for you?
It was definitely a nights and weekends sort of thing.
Yeah.
We kind of knew. So I have to credit my husband a little bit for this because he started his own business about a year before I started thinking about doing mine. I kind of saw what that process was like.
Yeah. Not too scary.
No,
Maybe you
it
could
seemed like
approach
I can
it.
do this,
Yeah.
And he's in marketing, so he has some skills that were helpful to me
Yep.
for kind of thinking about where my skills might fit in a marketplace that
Yeah. He
that could
helps to
still be.
expand your ideas a little bit, right? Maybe you should think
Yeah,
about this and this.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So we'd just done some brainstorming for a while based on just my feeling that I wasn't satisfied with the kind of world that I was living in.
Yeah.
And I was honestly very burned out with less the mission of the work that I was doing, but sort of the day-to-day, energy of
Yeah.
my life. And so I was trying to figure out, I'd lived in Huntsville again for a few years and just really felt like I hadn't plugged in the way I'd hoped to. The city had changed a lot since I left. And coming back in, it felt like a lot of the community networks that had existed before COVID had just been eviscerated. So,
Yeah.
you come back in and there's not as many places to plug in anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
So I just felt very isolated and thought, I want to be out in the world, out in my community, not in my house, 80 hours a week. And what can I do that would use my skills to get us there? And so that was kind of the brainstorming process. And I thought, well, I've got all this publication experience. What can we do with a publication? Is there something that I could create that would be valuable, that would, that people would actually pay for? So there was a lot of brainstorming there. We came up with the idea for this magazine, and I basically started learning what I needed to do to launch it about 6 months to a year before I ended up quitting the corporate job. So I had, I think, a full magazine created, mocked up with sample ads and everything. And within a few months, I went around kind of sussing out the community and trying to get a few partners, and ended up quitting my job, I think about 2 weeks before the first issue came out.
Oh my gosh.
So that was...
Did they know that you were working on this on the side? Were they aware of it, or?
They knew that I was not planning on staying for long. I didn't really communicate as much to this is what I'm doing and this is what but I did give them some signals that, okay, you need to probably start looking for someone else in this position next year because this is not, something I'm going to be doing long term, which they were prepared for. It was about a 1 year, 10-year position before the two people before me left also. Because it was a pretty high burnout role. So I think it was not unexpected for the company either. But yeah, I did a lot of working until 2 a.m. on a Saturday night to try to get the magazine ready for prime time while I still had a 9 to 5.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
But it was something that you were passionate about. So sometimes it makes those late nights a little bit better.
Yeah.
A little bit easier. It's new and it's, which is exciting.
I got to do a lot of the creative work, which felt rejuvenating in a lot of ways.
Yes, for sure. For sure. This is early on, and I think you and I have talked about this, but I too was a journalism major when I started school. And I'll never forget the first time I sat down when our computer, we got it like one of the first Macs at
Amazing.
our school, and using the desktop publishing tool, and it was like the coolest thing ever. And I think when you just get to flex that creative wheel, it's just a different type of energy, right? Where
Absolutely.
you can pull those late nights and do that thing.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me a little bit about discovering the niche and the need here in Huntsville, because the publication is very specific.
It is.
It's called
Let's pull
called
it up.
Welcome Home Huntsville. It's absolutely beautiful. And you've got amazing sponsors and partners who have joined forces to really unveil this. But it's very unique in that it really hits these first-time home buyers here in town. It's not just for everybody, right? It's for people who come to this city for the first time. So talk a little bit about how you discovered that niche, and really, because there's a lot of, I don't want to say competition, there's a lot of publications here. There's a lot of stuff going on. So just talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one of the thoughts that I had was sort of in life in general. It's hard to plug into a new city. I've moved several times to several different cities, moving even, and honestly, the hardest for me was moving back to Huntsville I was in North Carolina before then, because that was my first post-COVID move. And it felt like cities had changed, and there were fewer things that felt natural to me to plug in person with other people.
Yeah.
And so that had been something that's been kind of bouncing around my mind for a while. How do I plug in? Where are these places that tell newcomers to a city what to do, where to go, who to trust? That those kind of three core things that make you feel like you're belonging in a community. And that, even though, I was born here and I had grown up here when I was a kid. So I knew that was a need that we had, and I heard that from other people who were in my same situation. Hey, I moved here, I work remote, I don't have any friends. I have kids, but like, if your kids are too young to be in school, then you don't really have like mom friends either as much. Especially if you have a day job and you can't go to the mom groups. And so that's a lot of what I and a lot of the kind of acquaintances I talked to were struggling with. So I knew that was a need that existed. And then there's a publication in other places in the country that does something similar to this. And so when I was kind of looking around at things that combined my skills and interests, I rolled across that, and, looking at it, I thought, I can do that. I can do that better than that. So why shouldn't I? And that's generally where my cheerleader comes in. My spouse is very encouraging, and she's like, yeah, you could do it better. Go team, So it was lovely to have a supporter in house. And so I started rolling it up, and I said, well, let's see how well I can do before I, make the jump. Let's see what kind of publication I can put together and what kind of model we're going to roll up for how we're going to pay for it. Because one of the key things about Welcome Home Huntsville is there's no charge to the reader. And they don't have to opt in. So it gets delivered to their mailbox automatically within a certain period of time after they submit their change of address form to the USPS. So it's not something they have to find when they're already in a really busy time. And it's not something that they have to know about to get involved in, which is something that I felt really strongly about, because it's just, asking someone to make another kind of opt-in decision. Even, I try to follow, the important Huntsville accounts when I moved here, but I missed a few. And I missed a few for years. So as good a job as you try to do, there's always something you're going to miss. And I wanted to kind of fill in that gap. To kind of help people get connected quickly.
I love that. So this is the first year that this has been out. You've had a couple of how many issues have come out?
We just released our 7th issue in July. So it's a monthly issue. And we're on a good trajectory.
That's awesome. So talk a little bit about some of the partners that you that are part of this initiative. I mean, because this is for new residents here in Huntsville, this is sort of a first stop shop to get exposure to service providers and different organizations. And so talk to me a little bit about who's come on board and who's rallying around Welcome Home Huntsville.
Absolutely. So I feel very strongly as I suppose the publisher of this magazine. I have a bunch of hats, right? As we all who start businesses wear a bunch of hats. So from a sort of a CEO perspective, there's one thing, but from the publisher's perspective, there's another. And as the person compiling this magazine, I feel really strongly about having a lot of editorial content. So it's at least 70% non-paid articles that are, compilations of useful things for people. Where are all the parks? Where are, all the little shops, maybe areas, you should probably know that Bridge Street exists. You should probably know sort of what you'll find downtown, that sort of thing. And that's not sponsored by any one partner. That's stuff that just I put together that people need to know. But the partners that are most sort of affected by this, and the partners that have been eager to get on board, are people who run businesses in those industries that people lose when they move.
Yeah.
So you move from Michigan to Huntsville. Okay, what do you have to get your first year? You have to get a doctor. You have to get a dentist. You probably have to get someone to inspect your roof. You probably have to get, someone to do your lawn or someone to do your house cleaning if you do that. There's just a bunch of things that you can't bring with you.
Yeah.
And so people in this audience are in that phase where like they have to buy, they have to choose, they have to make a decision. And we're in a position to offer them trustworthy, vetted people that make that decision easier.
Right.
And so that's what we offer to our partners, and those are the partners that we get on board. So we have our back cover is this really amazing plumber. They are One Tom Plumber. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're a woman-owned, woman-led company. They put this pink plunger.
I love that.
Right.
I know we talked about that.
They're delightful.
I love the creative on that too. I just thought that was genius.
Right. They're delightful, and their whole vibe is, you can trust a random guy to come into your house at 3 a.m. when your toilet breaks, because it's usually the woman of the household making that decision. And, so they're vetted, they're professional, they've got uniforms. Like, it's great.
Love it.
So people in those sorts of industries, we've been really excited to partner with Google Fiber.
Sort of like the Angie's List, but in print form.
Absolutely.
Right? A little bit.
Yeah. We try to do just kind of, these are the best. These are the people that are unique, that offer something, that kind of sparkle, that's a little special, that people we know can trust and enjoy working with.
I love that. And I think remind me again how, if someone wants to get involved and become an advertiser in Welcome Home Huntsville, and you already have someone who's in that similar field, how does that work? So like if, is there some limitations on that, or how do you structure that?
Do not officially offer exclusivity.
Okay.
Unofficially, I don't like having a lot of people in the same vertical.
Yeah.
So I really look at what makes people unique. So, if we have two companies that are kind of in the same industry, I'm going to want them each to emphasize why they're special and why you should maybe kind of gravitate toward one or the other depending on what you need.
Right.
I find that, and I always make sure that they're comfortable working together. There's an attitude that a lot of times you have competitors, but you also have collaborators, right? You have people that are in your industry but a little bit different are often some of your best partners, because you can kind of send people to them when they're not quite what you want, and then they'll do the same thing for you. So I look for people who have that attitude if I'm going to put two companies in that are offering similar services.
Yeah, competimates.
Yeah,
right. We've heard that. That is a very common
like that term.
phrase around here. But I mean, it's a small town enough, right? There's a lot of business to go around. So
it's also a big town as far as how many people there are. There's lots of business. There are lots of people to go around.
It's insane. But it's a huge city, but it's got that small town vibe for sure, which I love. And you've probably heard of this, but the number of times that it's like a half a degree of separation in this town is just insane.
Or that you just run into people. I was getting my nails done yesterday, and I was literally in the next chair with the woman who runs the Newcomers Club, and I was just like, "Hi, we need to go to coffee next week." She's like, "Yes, we do." And it's just, we didn't plan on meeting, but you just see people around town, and that's just the way the world works.
Yeah, it is. So what are some of the big goals that you have next for Welcome Home Huntsville? Like what are some of the big things that people can anticipate either seeing as part of the publication and then the remainder of the year, or what big things you guys have going on?
So I have sort of micro and macro goals, right? My immediate goals for the magazine are just to continue making it just a really excellent product as I get feedback from my people in the community. I was at the Washington update the other day and realized, I don't have anything in here on who are our representatives and how, you contact them. And that's the thing that we need to know when we move into town. So I've got, a bunch of scribbled notes on what I'm going to put on that section. So just adding things as I think, and people give me feedback on what, needs to be in this resource guide for new residents. And then sort of on a large scale, I want this to be not like the company is Welcome Home Magazine. It isn't just Welcome Home Huntsville. And I want us to be big. I want us to do Welcome Home Madison and Welcome Home Athens and Welcome Home Franklin, and just keep expanding to all these high growth communities that need to welcome new people.
I love that so much. I mean, I think the cities, try to do a really good job of communicating out things that they have and resources and all of that. But I mean, they're also operating under city budgets, which, doesn't necessarily have the greatest impact at times. So having something like this that is just a direct connection, I think is going to be just so advantageous, and just extremely beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the hope.
So I'm curious to shift gears just a little bit. So, you are in business and or have a cheerleader at home with your spouse, which is pretty awesome. And I love, my husband and I recently kind of joined forces in that regard a little bit too. And so it's been really, really interesting. It's a different dynamic. But I love the camaraderie of, and, based on what you said, you've got a cheerleader there always, right? And someone to kind of push you and be that coach to say, don't wear that and don't do that. And or whatever it may be, right? Because they're looking out for your best interest. How has that evolution been for you, just professionally speaking? And if you don't mind me asking.
Not at all. Yeah. It's honestly felt a little bit like coming home. When we started, our relationship, actually, we got married when we were both in grad school at the same school in very different programs, of course. I was in journalism and he was doing his MBA. But for a number of years after that, we worked very concurrently. We worked from home. He was working for a startup, running their marketing. I was, freelancing, doing editorial work, and then working for Cell Press. So we're very used to kind of working together, even if we're not working for the same business. And that just kind of naturally leads to talking about your work a lot.
Yeah.
I am sometimes ashamed to admit how many years it took me to fully understand marketing, even being married to a marketer. I just okay, so tell me what you do again. I'm going to need you to explain this a little more to someone who doesn't have an MBA.
Right.
So, but I've gotten to the point where I do feel like I get it now, and he kind of gets what I do at the same level, and so when you're in a point where you're used to kind of offering each other advice, hey, I came home from work and somebody said this and that was super upsetting. How should I handle it? And we've had that sort of relationship for a number of years now. So working together felt very natural in a lot of ways. I feel like, okay, now we're just kind of
just
getting
something new, right? Yeah.
Just doing the same thing. And it, honestly, I would have to hire a marketer if I didn't have one in my house, because that's not my expertise.
Yeah.
So it's delightful to kind of have someone around that I can do that. He jokes that I offer his services for free to too many people that are my clients. I'm like, well, if you join with us, we'll get you this, strategy session with a professional marketer. He's like, I charge for that. You can't just give that to people. But
it's but
they're paying me, so you're kind of getting money for that a little bit.
It's a win-win, right? It's all going to shake out.
It is, yeah.
That's pretty funny. Well, that's an added strength that you have, right? Kind of baked in there, which is awesome, and just allows you to see things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily see on your own, right? And vice versa, and just allows a better product. And but I love seeing the family unit kind of working behind the scenes like that. I'm always in admiration of couples that can do that, because I just honestly, because it's not easy. It is not easy, and it's it's only been a couple of months for us, and it's been hard, but it's also been really, really great. And I look at it as if you can have, two people aiming towards a single goal as opposed to just one, right?
Especially people who are very different in their skills and expertise. There's blind spots that, everyone has.
Yeah.
And, you need business advisors anyway. You need constantly people talking at you about, you're missing this. Maybe you need to think about this. And it's just one more that's constantly there, and it's great.
Yeah. Well, and you also know too that there's no one who's going to have your back more so than your partner, who has the financial incentive to see you succeed, the personal incentive to see you not come home and want to pull your hair out every day. And
there's also a little bit of the no one knows exactly what you're doing as much as your spouse. When you're sitting down in the evening to read a book, and he's like, you have that email that that person's waiting on. Yes, but
right.
So there's a little bit of that. We get to push each other a little bit on you still have a thing to do or today, or did you forget that person? So there's some of that.
It's good accountability, which is important across the board, not just in business. So well, congratulations to you, and congratulations congratulations to you guys for just launching this, getting it off the ground, creating something beautiful, and it's out there and it's active and it's doing its thing. And it's pretty obvious that the community is responding really, really well to it. So
I'm so excited about that.
I mean,
Honestly, it's been so great.
it has been so great. And, we obviously huge fans, but, came to your launch party a couple of months ago, and I was blown away to see just the movers and the shakers and the who's who. And I'm like, dang, Alisa, I'm just so proud of you.
It was honestly
awesome.
unbelievable coming to that event. The amount of support that people gave us, I loved it. It
was whoever did your party planning was fabulous. If it was you and Casey,
it was absolutely not. The party planner for Google Fiber did this with us. Her name is Heather, and she is just a genius. So
it was fantastic. Yeah. But it's obvious you guys have landed on something, that our community needed. And I think if you're wanting to launch something that allows a newbie to connect into our culture here, I mean, this is it. It's such a great avenue to allow people to do that. So congratulations to you guys, and kudos to you all. And just can't wait to see the continued success of what you're doing. So Welcome Home Huntsville. If you want to get involved, definitely, check them out. I mean, I'm sure if anyone who's interested in advertising or contributing content can just go to the website, which we'll link and all that good stuff. But
absolutely. I'll buy you a coffee and we'll chat.
Awesome. Yes, she'll buy you coffee, free coffee. Awesome. Thank you, Alisa. We so appreciate you.
Thanks so much for having me. This was amazing.
Absolutely. All right. We'll see you guys next time.